Hi, I'm David Broadbent and welcome to the Chaddy Enders, where each week I am joined by somebody with a connection to Oldham Athletic to take a look back at their time at the club and talk about the good times and the bad times and any stories that they might want to share with us. As always, a huge thank you to our sponsors, to NFL Weekends, to Eden Creative and to AC Tyres, all brilliant businesses, all run by Oldham Athletic supporters as well. Check them all out on social media. It's AC Tyres, NFL Weekends and Eden Creative. A big thank you to all you guys. This week, it's a little bit different. This is a two-parter because our guest this week spent 31 years at Latics, starting in 1981 before retiring in 2012. So he was commercial manager for a long time and then also chief exec of the club and on the board for a long time as well. So definitely 2 episodes worth of material here. And we're delighted to welcome him and to have him on. This week's guest on the Chaddy Enders, Alan Hardy. Alan, a very warm welcome to the Chaddy Enders. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good to see you, Brody. Not seen you for a while.
I know, even though we're only on Zoom, it's still some sort of face-to-face contact. It's just about keeping me sane at the moment.
That's good news.
How are you? You're now in semi-retirement with a fairly interesting job.
Doing okay. I mean, obviously the last 12 months has been a bit tough, but it's kept me sane doing some little bits of disciplinary work for the FA, which is interesting. Keeps the old grey matter working, so to speak.
Yeah, I suspect he's very interesting. And I know you can't talk about it, but
of course not, no.
Obviously, there have been some very interesting cases in the last 12 months or so at the FA.
One or two?
Yes, but obviously we can't talk about that, so we'll move on. We're going to take you back to, 40 years now, Alan, 40 years ago.
You know something, it is. It was in the beginning of April 1981 when I joined Latics. And we're now at the end of March, so it's bang spot on 40 years ago, which is incredible, isn't it?
This will go out, so we're recording this on Thursday, and it's going out next Thursday, which I believe is April the 1st. So,
all right.
Pretty much your 40-year anniversary. So let's take you back to 1981. I don't want to make you feel old, but by that point, I was 5.5 months old. So, how did you come to join Latics?
Well, I'd been associated with Mosley Football Club since I was 10 years old. I was ball boy there. I used to go and fag the ball when it went over the stand at the park end and bring it back and whatever, because they only had 2 balls. So when one was on, I had to go for the other one quickly. And from being ball boy, I mean, I just had a good association with the club. And I went onto the committee at the age of 16. It was a committee-run club. And I eventually became the club secretary. And eventually, in 1979, I was appointed the first full-time employee the club had ever had when they appointed me as commercial manager and secretary. So it was a wonderful time at Mosley. I'd only been full-time 2 years when I had an interesting phone call from a friend of mine who said, "Would you be interested in talking to Oldham Athletic?" I said, "I'll speak to anybody." So I had a chat with Mike Twiss, who was commercial manager at the time at Oldham Athletic. He'd come up from Southampton to take over as commercial manager. He'd only been there, I think, around about 12 months at the time. But I had a chat with him. He offered me a job as his assistant at the time. And obviously I accepted that. So it was at the beginning of April 1941. So it's exactly 40 years ago, as you say, which is amazing, really.
Sorry, go on.
Well, what I was going to say was that 6 months later, him being a southerner and his wife, a southerner, couldn't settle up in the north. Don't know why. So he upstakes, he said, "I'm going back down south. We're going back down to Devizes." So I said, "All right." And then the chairman at the time was Harry Wilde, who was the company secretary at John Willie's Brewery. Of course, they were the major shareholders of the club. And Harry Wilde called me into the boardroom one day. He said, "Mr. Twiss is leaving." I would like to offer you the job. Do you want it? I said, of course. So that was it. And of course, we had a wonderful board in those days. You know, I mean, I say, Mr. Harry Wilde was the chairman, but you'd people like Ian Stott, who later became chairman, David Briley, a lot of local businessmen. Later on, we had people like Norman Holden, Peter Chadwick, Rod Adams, Derek Taylor, John Sledin from Weathershield Double Glazing, and they were all local businessmen who had a real affinity to the club because they all basically worked in the town. And it was wonderful what we had going at Oldham Athletic at the time. All right, finances weren't brilliant. They never were. It was always touch and go, scraping and scrapping around for money every year. But we managed to get through it, of course. But of course, it was only what? It was 12 months after I joined, because the manager was Jimmy Frizzle when I joined. So I had 1 year with Jimmy, and then in 1982, Big Joe came along. And things gradually started to pick up.
So you remember much about your sort of early days in terms of like the deals you did and the people you brought in? Because we've done a similar job at Oldham over the course of the years in terms of the commercial side of it, and I think I can pretty much remember every one of mine.
When I joined the club, the name on the shirt was Red Shoer. You won't remember this. A local electrical company from, I think they were in the Denton Reddish area or something. And it had just come to basically the end of their agreement. So it was then a case of, you know, trying to find sponsors to get on board. And over the years, Matty, we had like Martins, the motor dealers, Slumberland, Bovis. Bovis were the sponsors when we went to Wembley in 1990 in the League Cup final. And how that came about was, of course, there was a plan for building a Tesco and a Marks and Spencer's on Clayton Plainfields. And Bovis were expecting to be the company that was building it. So they wanted to get the name around the town and what have you. And so we had a couple of years with Bovis on the shirts. And nothing came of that because of the situation of people wanting to walk the dogs on Clayton Plainfields. It was eventually granted town green status, so that was scrapped before later on being resurrected because John Batty, who was leader of the council later on, wanted to have Sports Park 2000, but that's another story. So with all those, of course, we had after Bovis, we had JD Sports, who were fabulous sponsors. They had, I think, a run of, first of all, about a 5-year run with JD Sports, and then with Hillstone, we had umpteen sponsors. And JD, I had a very, very good relationship with JD. John Wardle and Dave Makin down at JD Sports, who, as you know, they're a massive organisation now. John Wardle and David Makin have sold their shares in the company. I think the small interest, but basically they're out of it now. But I still kept in touch with them. And later on, after a break, we got involved with them again through their Cabrini brand. And they then bought Blacks, what do they call them? The outdoor people, outdoor tents and one thing and another. They supplied them. We had Blacks on the shirts. We had Cabrini on the shirts. So over a period of probably about 2 5-year spells, I think it will probably be over 10 years. You know, we had a good relationship with JD. I still keep in touch with John Wardle, who later on came chairman at Manchester City. It was good to invite me down there when he was chairman and have a look around the boardroom and the stadium at the Etihad and what have you. So it was always graft, though, as you will know if you've been looking for shirt sponsors. It's never easy. And I would think in today's climate, it's very, very tough.
So you mentioned that just after you've been there a year or so, that Joe Royle breezed in.
Joe Royle. Wonderful times.
How was your relation? I mean, particularly in the early years, because whilst we got to the playoffs in 87, 88, and then had that fantastic couple of years from 89, 90, it did take him sort of 4 or 5 years to start putting his stamp on it and to build the squad that he wanted, which I guess...
He was given time. You know, managers don't get time these days. And I think it's because of the board we had at the time that, you know, he was given that time to put the team together. But from a point of view of a relationship, we had a love-hate relationship, me and Joe. We loved each other, yet we hated each other. But what he didn't like, and I was always keen to do it, was pre-match entertainment. Got to put something on before the game, what have you. And you get involved with local companies who want to come and do something before games. And the best one of all, which I can remember, yeah, and you might not be old enough to remember this, but there was a nightclub in Oldham called Froggies.
Oh, no, that's before.
Was it before you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It was on the corner of Union Street and King Street. It's had a few names over the years. I think it's the Billiard Hall now.
Right, okay.
But they changed its name to Froggies, and you know they wanted to do some promotion with us, and they wanted to bring some people dressed as frogs down to the game. So I said, yeah, I'm all up for this, like, you know. So we had these frogs on the pitch and what have you, pre-match. And I think players might have been warming up or whatever. And Joe came out to the top of the steps there, out of the dressing rooms, and looks on the pitch. Al, what are these effing frogs doing on the pitch? I said, it's money, Joe. I said, it's money. It's money bringing in. He didn't particularly like pre-match entertainment, but he understood that I had a job to do. And, you know, we'd fall out one day, the following day, back to normal. You know, it was a fabulous working relationship. He understood it totally.
And just kind of we sort of exploded onto the national stage. Were you involved at all in the decisions that were taken to put the plastic pitch in?
No, that was Ian Stott. After Harry Weil stepped down as chairman, Ian Stott took over as chairman. And Ian was always one keen to push the plastic pitch side. I don't think Joe was too keen on it, but he did see the commercial benefits from it. You know, and it was well used while it was down there. It wasn't the best. I mean, as you know, the early days of the plastic pitches with the sand infill was terrible. But I think I think it was better than the QPR one that they had down there, and possibly the Luton one. But one thing we had a problem with was the wind up at Boundary Park. You put your ball down and it's winding, it blows it away. You have to have little bits of sand at the side so they could tee the ball up so it wouldn't run away. But it was good commercially, and it meant that we could bring a lot of schools in during the week and weekends and whatever to do some work on it. And it also gave us an opportunity to take some of the slope out of the pitch, because the pitch did slope about 6 foot from the Jimmy Frizzle stand down to the Chaddy end. And when they were reconstructing that, they lowered the pitch at the Jimmy Frizzle stand by about 1.5 feet and raised it 1.5 feet at the Chaddy end. So we took about a 3 foot drop out of the pitch. So there's still a slight drop of about 3 foot over the 100 yards. So it's not too bad now. You can still see it, but it's not too bad. But it was wonderful. I mean, we played some good football on it, didn't we? I mean, it was wonderful. You when did you start watching Latics?
My first game, and it should have been a lesson, really. I should have known. My first game was a Friday night, 4-0 home win over Reading, and it was the night of the Zeebrugge ferry disaster. So 1997. Right. So my first game at the club, an international tragedy. There you go.
So the plastic pitch would be down, but then, wouldn't it?
I think the plastic pitch really helped people my age become fans of the club. I used to play on that plastic pitch for school. In fact, in 1988, I broke my arm playing on that plastic pitch in the Junior Latics tournament.
Did you?
But I think that massively helped grow a generation of Oldham fans, because you could access the pitch and you could play on the pitch. And I don't care how old you are, it's massive being able to play on a pitch.
Yeah, it is. And of course, at that time, we had, you talk about junior Latics, we had some, wonderful staff on the commercial side. We had Betty, bless her soul, who's left us, and Tony Pascal, Betty and Tony Pascal. Big Gordy was in the commercial department from 85. I took him on in 1985 to organise the Blue Bond, as it was called then. And he did an excellent job on that. And what a wonderful character Gordy was. Loved him to bits. Shame he's not with us any longer. But I keep in touch with Tony Pascal. The people from that era, Judith, who was in the office, give her a ring now and again. I try and keep in touch with all the people if I can, because they were good people. They were good people in those days.
I think that comes across. I've interviewed a few players from that time. So Ian Marshall and Andy Ritchie I've spoke to recently, and they both sort of really talk about how it really was a family club, and that the players knew all the staff and everything like that, and people would sort of genuinely enjoy being there. Yeah,
the players didn't mind coming into the office. If they wanted some help, they would come in and have a chat with me or Judith or anybody else who, can you help us with this? We'd help as much as we can. So we had a good friendly working relationship with all the players, really. And there's some characters, weren't there? There's some characters. God grieve.
Well, I was told a couple of stories on last week's episode with Ian Marshall about Tuesday Club and the players that. Oh, there's a laugh there which would suggest you're aware of it.
Don't know anything about it. Don't know anything about it.
I believe that was, a couple of the players from the time have said that, let's say it helped with team bonding.
It was good. I mean, Joe knew it went on. But he turned a blind eye to it because he knew it created that bond between the players. And it certainly helped the team spirit on the pitch, certainly.
Was there a point sort of off the pitch, watching every game every week, where you thought, after Joe had been there a few years, we're going somewhere here, we've got the base of a side here?
Well, you could see the kind of work Joe was doing there. He was picking some decent players up for basically no money, because Ian Stott won't let him have any money. I mean, he'd identify a player and he'd go to Stotty. And the first thing Stotty would say is, how much? And he said, nothing. He said, well, yeah, let's have a look then. But we could go back and talk about all the players he picked up. You like your Andy Riches and your Dennis Irwins and your Andy Linnigans and your Tommy Wrights, who all came in for little or no money, discarded by other clubs. And you've got to give credit to Stotty in that respect, that he backed Joe in his judgment in bringing those players in. And it led to us getting an excellent team together at the back end of the 80s. Yeah.
So going back to the 80s, 89-90, the cup run. Well, both cup runs, in fact. I guess.
Well, going back to that, on the commercial side, we didn't have a club shop as such. It was only a wooden hut. You should 87. You probably just remember the little wooden hut we had, and you could see what other clubs were doing commercially in relation to merchandise and what have you. So I went to the board. I said, look, we need to expand the retail side. We need a new shop with no money. So unless you can, raise the money, can't do anything. So I ended up going to the TSB Bank, because I then built up a good relationship with TSB, because they were sponsors of the Oldham 10K. We organised a 10K road run for 2 or 3 years, and we had upwards of 5,000 people running in it, paying some decent money. So it made us some money, and TSB sponsored that. So I had a good relationship with the TSB. So I went to them and said, can we look at getting some money off you to build a shop? So I said, how much do you want? So I'd had some prices in, and it was only a single story building this was going to be at the time. And it was £40,000 to build a single story shop. So I got the shop, the finances sorted out, put a business plan together. And I think it had to be repaid back over 5 years. and it was built in at the start of the 89 season, just in time for our cup run to flourish and to get us to Wembley in the following April in 1990. So it gave us the opportunity to get more products in, more merchandise in. If we hadn't have had that shop at that time, we wouldn't have been able to cope with the demand that there was from the Oldham people, Oldham supporters, for the need for the merchandise, the scarves, the jumpers, the bob hats, the fleece tops, everything. Anything we got in, we sold. I remember they were queuing up for some particular fleece tops, I think it was, and they're saying, "When have you got them in?" No, we haven't stopped. We're waiting for them to come anytime now. So a van pulls up outside, and they're all around the van, trying to get their hands on the stuff. Whoa, let us check it in first, But it was wonderful. I mean, it was great to see, the demand from the fans at that stage. It was great, and I think the fans have, appreciated us having that facility at that time.
How did the travel agents come about?
Well, it was we were doing some bookings. We had to get some bookings for Stott. It was always going down to the FA. Of course, he was an FA board member, so he'd always want some rail tickets doing. And I used to do them through an agency in Blackpool, and he came over and have a chat with us one time. He said, "Have you ever thought about operating a travel agency within your retail outlet? You've got a catchment area of 6,000-7,000 fans or whatever it is. They'll all take holidays. They'll all want to do some traveling. If you can sell holidays to them, you can make a bit of commission on it." So that's how that came about. We set that up, and Heather Rigby was our first manager from Shaw, and Jane came in later on, and I think how long did it run for? It probably run for around about 6 or 7 years, and it was tough. It was tough because every travel agent was cutting the prices, so you made less and less commission. So in the end, we just decided that it was only just washing its face at that stage, so it was terminated.
So the cup runs, 89-90. Let's start with the League Cup. Do you have before we get to Wembley, do you have a favourite game from that cup run in the League Cup?
I've got to say Arsenal, because they came to us as champions at that time, and of course we 3-1, I think, and they only got their goal in the last closing minutes of the game. I think it was, now I remember. But the reason that stands out in my mind is because I went in the dressing room to celebrate with the lads afterwards, but I ended up in the bath fully clothed. That was the time when they had one of these bloody big communal baths, no showers then, it was a big bath. So get hold of me and they dumped me in the bloody in the bath. So I had to go there and see sponsors absolutely soaking. And who was there? Vincent Brown, the photographer from the Cron, was there, and obviously he used to do photos for us with the sponsors after the game. So I remember him taking a photograph of me absolutely drenched, my suit and what have you, soaking through. I must have that photograph somewhere. I should have got it out for you, shouldn't I? But it stands out, that game, because of that reason, I suppose. But another game was Aston Villa, wasn't it? Did we play Aston Villa when Graham Taylor was manager? Yeah. And I remember the interview after the game with Graham Taylor. The commentator said to him about, what about the plastic pitch? And he said, look, let's not bring the plastic pitch into the equation. Plastic pitch and nothing to do about it whatsoever. We were beaten by a better side. That was another good one.
And did you go to the Southampton away game? Because the lads flew down, didn't they? Did you?
Well, that was interesting, because obviously we had flights. Never done anything like that before, but I'd got flights. Oh well, we had done it before, because we did Anglo-Italian. We played Genoa, And that was the coldest I've ever been at a football match, tell you that. Now, it was absolutely freezing in Genoa. At the Louis Ferrari Stadium, it was all concrete and it was absolutely freezing. We played Genoa and Corner, I think it was, away. So Stotty says, well, we can do them in the day. So I said, well, I'll have a look at it. So we flew out on the morning of the game, got a hotel in Genoa or whatever for the players to rest up. It's only a couple of hours by plane, of course, so you rest up players in the afternoon and the night match, and flew back after the match. And we did them in a day. Stotty was really proud of that. But yeah, we had to do flights to Genoa and Corner. We took some fans with us as well, which, I mean, I think they appreciated it. You know, we had an afternoon in Genoa before the game, so it was cold. And then, of course, with that experience, we looked at Southampton and West Ham in the second leg, flying to those games as well, and taking fans with us. And that was what it was. It was, once you go in touch with the airline, they organised the ticketing for you. They sent the tickets up and we sold them at the shop, and they were very well supported by the fans, and some wonderful trips on them. Yeah, it was good. What an experience.
And Wembley. What do you remember about the lead up to the Littlewoods Cup Final? Because certainly in commercial, that must have been absolutely manic.
So we got the Littlewoods Cup into the town leading up to the game. We had a Littlewoods store in town at that time as well, so we had it on display there, and we were selling merchandise in the store as well. So it was absolutely manic. Oh, a lot of shops and what have you putting displays in the window. It was absolutely mad, of course. We took over 30,000 down there. It was incredible, really. And I decided on that day. I mean, Nick, you know my son Nick and Samantha. We went down as a family, and we were in the stand, sat there together, and I think he ended up crying at the end of the game.
I'm sure he'll be delighted.
A few of us did. A few of us did, yeah. Yeah.
I think that I went down to the game on, you talked about flying to games. I remember going to that game on one of the trains the club put on.
Yeah, we did trains as well. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it was at the... I know Oldham Mumps wasn't particularly well used at the time. We had to make some special arrangements for us to get the station opened at that time and put the train on and what have you. Very, very popular as well. About 1,000 people on there. It's great. I think it brought back memories for some people of what they called the old league liner, which was before my time as well. Actually, I think one or two Latics fans remember the league liner, but I'd never experienced that.
And what about the FA Cup semi-finals? Were you in the stands there? Were you sort of behind the scenes? Where were you at for the cup finals? Because what a day that first FA Cup.
The FA Cup semi-finals, of course, this was at Main Road.
Yeah.
So on this, I think I'd be in the director's box with my wife on both games actually, and that was the game when Nick Henry had a goal disallowed, wasn't it? It wasn't. Yeah, that wasn't the United replay from '94. No, that was yeah. They tend to all merge into one of these games now. There've been so many good games around that time. But yeah, I thought we were unfortunate not to go through at that stage. But wonderful occasions. I mean, Main Road, full house on 2 occasions within a short space of time. You'd never have believed it, to be honest. And it was just a pity that we didn't get through to the final.
And then have a couple of weeks off in summer, and then come back for the season that ends in a league championship. So again, just sort of carrying on, I guess.
Yes, the following season, that wasn't it. We remind me when we went up. That was 91, 92, wasn't it?
1991.
1991.
30
91.
years about now, yeah.
91, 92 was the first year in the First Division.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we just missed out in previous years in the playoff. I mean, you know, when we were in the playoffs first time, it was the first year that the playoffs were introduced. We finished third, I think it was, wasn't it? And if the playoffs hadn't been introduced, we'd have gone up automatically that year. But the playoffs, and of course, it was Leeds United, wasn't it? And we did quite well over at Ellen Road. And we all know what Andy Barlow, what have you, was it Andy Barlow who scored that? Who scored the goal, Brody? Remind me now.
See, I was at that game, the home leg, but I remember very little about it because it was my first sport in the club.
I'm thinking of Andy Barlow being involved with the John Sheridan penalty. That was in another game, wasn't it? That one. But,
that was a title-winning game. Yeah.
Yeah, but we were we'd scored with about 2 minutes to go. I think it was something like that. And players were basically still celebrating, and Leeds had taken the kick off pretty quickly, and they went down, scored again, and they went through on the away goals. Cruel, really, cruel. But what was your other question?
Then go into 1991, and the team start like an absolute steam train. You've got Ian Marshall's hat-trick at Wolves on the opening day, and I think it was the middle of November by the time we'd got beat. I remember going to Port Vale and getting beat 2-0. I think it was the 17th game of the season.
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, commercial, the club shop was doing a roaring trade in those days because of the merchandise and what have you. And we're so successful. And the thing is that I think it helped the town as well. It helped the town to be successful. I remember John Batty always saying that, you know, if Oldham win at weekend and what have you, it makes productivity on the following Monday go up in the town because they're all wanting to go and work and, you know, talk about the game and work hard and what have you. And it's also, I don't know if you remember, you know, I think it's called the Hilton Arcade in Oldham. Do you know it?
Yeah. I remember it was done out. In fact, your photo was on there or something.
It's still there, I think. I think it's still there. I couldn't believe it. Somebody told me, I said, your photo. I said, I don't give over. So I went up and had a look, and there I am. Again, I think the Oldham Chronicle photograph of me in a sheepskin coat looking like Del Boy, or probably John Motson, which either one. And on the pitch when we'd have to call the game off because it was waterlogged or something, and I'm there and I'm part. It says I'm part of Oldham's history, the town's history, but whether I am or not, I don't think so. But it's still there, believe it or not. Last time I looked, it was anyway. I've not been up for 12 months.
So,
but yeah, it helped the town as well. The success of the football club, I think, gave a successful town in those days.
Because at the time as well, the rugby club were doing all right as well because they got to Wembley the same weekend that the football club did. So the rugby club was doing all right as well. That's
right. Yeah, it was a double weekend. Yeah.
So 1991. So we've started off like an absolute steam train. We're flying in the league. Was there a point at that point during the season at any time that you thought we're going up here? We're going to win this league.
Well, yeah. You always think that because the players we had, you know, you always had a chance, and we've been up there all season basically, and it was disappointing that we weren't at the top on the final day of the season, but we sorted that out on the day when, well, you know, the scoreboard, because Nick, my son, was operating the scoreboard, and you know, I kept getting messages to him, and Mark Gorey were there and flashed the score up from West Ham and Notts County, like, you know, so it kept the players going in that Sheffield Wednesday game, from 2-0 down, you know, to actually win it. Incredible. And the scenes at the end of that match, absolutely amazing. And then, of course, the story is, and it's true story, that they had the actual trophy down at Upton Park to present to the West Ham team after the game. Of course, it couldn't happen. The league are on to me. We'll make arrangements for it to be couriered up to you. Can you be at the ground on Sunday at such a time. I said, yeah, I'll be here. So I was at the ground and the courier came and this big wooden box and what have you, and they got the trophy out. And lo and behold, it had a plate on the bottom with West Ham's name on it. But fortunately, you remember, we also at that time, we had the Boundary Park Trophy Centre. So I got Mac, who did all the engraving for us in the trophy centre there. I said, get that off there and get ours on it. So he changed it straight away. But it was all a plaque that you could easily take off. But we put another one on, make sure it was right for us. But it was crazy that they'd planned to do it. And they thought, because they were going around doing a lap of honour, I believe, at Upton Park, because our game finished very, very late. The last they'd heard it was 2-2. Wasn't prepared for an injury time penalty.
And do you remember the celebrations afterwards?
They were good. I mean, I think we tended to end up, more often than not, there were those days, you know, Joe and one or two of the directors, they owned Norman Leisure, as it was called, up at Shaw. So somebody would either go up to the Grey Mare or up to the Norman Leisure. So I think it might have been Norman Leisure that night, but you know, we always went somewhere for a drink after a good victory. It was wonderful.
You mentioned the scoreboard there. At the time, am I right in saying it was the biggest one in the country outside Wembley when we brought that in?
I think you're right in that. It was a company in Leeds that did it, and again, I was keen to have one. It was all down to costs again. I had to prove that it would pay for itself. So we had a couple of panels on either side, which were sold. Hotel Smokies had one. I think John Lees had the other. And over the years, John Lees, I know a lot of the fans didn't really appreciate the brewery being majority shareholders, but we did get some money out of them in sponsorship and advertising and what have you over the years. But we had to put up an enormous steel frame to hold it. And that was expensive, but I managed to get that produced and erected at a reasonable cost. And then the scoreboard was craned in, and it did us well for quite a number of years, actually. And it's a pity we haven't got one now, but that's another thing.
Yeah, there's a lot we haven't got now. So what then? So you get to the end of the 1991 season. We've just won Division 2, and we're going up to Division 1. So at that point, the rules have changed a little bit, and we have to rip up the plastic pitch.
Well, yeah, you weren't allowed to have in the first division. You weren't allowed to have an artificial pitch. So it was all systems go and rip it up and put a new grass pitch in. And we went for what we called a fibre sand pitch at that time. Which was supposed to take more wear and tear, and it means you could have used it for more community events. As it worked out, the players actually complained about the pitch being too hard because the amount of fibre that was mixed in with the sand. It was a very hard surface, and a couple of years later, we had to take some of it off. Take some of the fibre out, put some more sand on, and reduce the content of fibre in it to make it a little bit softer for the players. So that was another expense, of course, that we had to do to get into the first division. But of course, and not only that, you remember from a sponsor's point of view, all we had at that time was a little box basically on the halfway line, which held, I think it was 12, 16 people, with a little bar area, as you went through the first door, and right in the tunnel area it was, because we had all them boxes on the front of the stand, which Ken Bates put up in his day there. And all of a sudden you've got Arsenal, you've got Man United, you've got Liverpool, you've got Tottenham, you've got all the big clubs coming, and the demand for sponsorship started already. As soon as you've promoted, enquiries were coming in, and we couldn't accommodate them all in that and make as much money as we wanted to make out of it. So I came up with the idea of putting the people calling the porter cabins on stilts up in the corner of the Chaddy end of the main stand. I mean, a company called Sibcast from Scotland who designed it. It was a little bit different to what they'd done before because of what we wanted. wanted a viewing box separate to the dining and drinking area because of you weren't allowed to take a drink while you're having, see the match from having a drink. So all these hurdles we had to get over and keep the safety advisory group happy. And we ended up there then with 2 boxes of 18 people and 2 boxes of 8 people. So it was a vast improvement on what we had previously. And, for a box of 18 people for a game against Arsenal, Man United, what have you, we could get £3,000 for a match sponsorship for that game, for that one box. So you can imagine what we'd get for the remainder. That included the meals and the free bar and what have you. And the income we had from that facility, more than covered the cost. We were only able to rent it. Sipcast wouldn't let us buy it. They said, no, we don't do that. We just let you lease it. But it served its purpose and, lasted a long, long time.
And it's just
still going now. I don't know. I think players use it now, don't they? I think.
Yeah.
Not sure.
As far as I know, players use it for lunch, and because it was only about 2 years ago, it had a new kitchen put in there, so I think the players use that for their lunch and their meetings.
Yeah.
Now.
So there's a lot of planning in between, knowing you're up and getting ready for the start of the new season. There's a hell of a lot of planning to do and things to put in place before the season got underway.
Am I right in saying that was the season as well? Was that the closed season the Chaddy went to seats, or was that later?
No, that was I think it was when Neil Redfern scored that penalty. I think the roof had been taken off, hadn't it?
It had started having work done on it, certainly, yeah.
I'm just not sure on the dates there, but I think the roof had been taken off because it needed a new roof on there. Whether we started putting the concrete beams in there for because it was all wooden in there originally, and we had to put concrete beams in. I mean, the fans, they've got better memories than I have, and they'll be able to remember exactly when the wooden beams were taken out and when the concrete was put in. But yeah, I mean, it was important that we went to. Well, it was a requirement if you got up there, you had to go all seater, wasn't it? So we had to start making plans for that as well. Yeah.
From the first season, the Old Division 1 was actually the last season of the Old Division 1. During that time, they were formulating the Premier League. How was it being a part of the first season of the Premier League? And obviously Sky had pumped a load of money in, and it sort of seemed that football in general was kind of recovering from a bit of a slump in the 80s to being a lot more popular again.
Well, if you remember all the... this is, again, something that Joe wouldn't like because the old razzmatazz before the games, I mean, they had the Sky girl dances on, didn't they? And Sky really built the games up. And I think our first game, was it Norwich City on Sky? Norwich comes to mind.
I remember all the fireworks and everything like that.
Yeah, the fireworks, the girl dancing girls and what have you, and they made the most of it at that time, Sky. But it was a lot more demanding, of course. I mean, not about all the media that needed to come to games. Poor old Roy down there would have been pulled out with all his media requests and what have you. But the demands on everything was so much greater. Demands on the players, during the week, personal appearances and what have you. It all mounted up. So, all of a sudden from being a team which normally was a lower reaches of the second division, as it was, up into the first division, there was more demands and more expected of you.
But from a commercial point of view, did you see kind of, I guess during the 80s when you were first there, you were dealing predominantly with locally based companies and businessmen. Did you see when we went up into Division 1 and with the inception of the Premier League, a lot more national interest in?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Because of the TV exposure, there was more national companies that wanted to get involved with perimeter advertising. Well, a lot of the perimeter advertising was sold centrally anyway in the early days, even in the early days. Now it's all done centrally. It's all done through the Premier League. So, clubs will have their own individual spots, but mainly it's all the same throughout the the Premier League now. But
were big was because of sort of Gunnar Halle. We were massive in Norway, weren't we?
well, yeah, I mean, Norway always took a lot of televised games over there. You know, from the first division, they were mad keen on English football. So every weekend over there, you'd be able to see 2 or 3 games anyway. You know, they'd record them and show them later or whatever, because York kicked off at the same time in those days. It's not spread out like it is now. But they always had a live match over there, so it was always important. And of course, when if we were being shown live in Norway as well, you'd find out that there'd be 1 or 2 foreign advertisers around the pitch as well who wanted to come on board because it'd be being shown in Norway. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a few Scandinavian type perimeter boards around the ground on occasion.
Yeah.
So we survived the first season of the Premier League, and then the Great Escape. 3 wins in the final week to stay up. How satisfying was that?
Well, that started off Aston Villa one, wasn't it? Away, where I was down there, and a Nick Henry goal, which you didn't see many of them, but you know what a wonderful occasion that was. I think the Aston Villa result. I think Ron Atkinson was the manager there, so Joe had put one over him at Aston Villa, as well as him put one over him against Sheffield Wednesday when we got Championship, of course. So he always had it in for Ron Atkinson, and of course that night, that result gave Man United the title, didn't it? Basically.
Well, we can't have it. Is it true that did Alex Ferguson send Joe Royle a crate of champagne the week after that?
I would think he did. Yes, I mean I can't actually remember, but I'm sure he would have done. Yeah. He's like that, Alex. He's like that. He's a good man. And then, of course, we had Liverpool and Southampton, wasn't it? So, and of course, then it was all panic stations for. I never thought we'd have beat Liverpool, but we did. And then coursing it against Southampton, and Matt Letizia weighs in with his goals. And of course, the famous commentary from Stuart Pike. Please, Mr. Referee, whatever he was called, I can't remember the referee's name now. Blow your whistle, blow your whistle. But yeah, incredible scenes. And you know, I've over the years, Brody, I mean, I've been very, very fortunate to be at the club when it's experienced its most successful times. You know, it has been a privilege to have been there during that period. I don't think the club, unfortunately, will see those days again. I'd like them to do, but it's going to be a tough ask, isn't it? But I've been privileged to have been there and involved in it through the club's most successful time.
And back of that, another season in the Premier League that ultimately ended, sadly, in relegation. From a commercial point of view, was it a massive hit going from the Premier League to the Championship?
Yeah, when you look at your guaranteed income, the best year that we ever had from like central income, the basic award you get from the Premier League and what have you, from sponsorship and TV games and what have you, we got £1.7 million from the Premier League. Now, from the Premier League, you're talking about what, £120 million per club before they kick a ball. Big difference now. It'd have been nice if we'd have been in the Premier League in these days, but it was just building up then. Obviously, the commercial aspect of the Premier League was getting bigger and bigger, and the TV deals were going up each few years. So, you know, there was more money going to the clubs. You still get the situation, though, now where clubs are not happy that they're not getting enough. Those who are on TV want more money, want to do their own TV deals and what have you, at the expense of the smaller clubs in the Premier League. But my argument goes is that there's too much money going in at the top of the game anyway, without it being filtered down through the divisions. There's got to be a more equal share of that money coming down to make clubs like Oldham Athletic and Rochdale and Blackpool, whatever it is, they've got to be able to compete on a regular basis, make it more even playing field, really.
Yeah, and something that they kind of struggled with for the last few years, and probably will continue to.
I don't know if I've told anybody this, but it's going back. This is probably jumping on a few years, but it was when what year would it be? When was the general elections? Was it 2009? Tony Blair, who was out of it at that time, but was going round. He was campaigning for the Labour Party. And my friend up at the Ram's Head at Denshaw, you know the Ram's Head, don't you?
I worked there behind the bar when I was about 19 for a couple of years.
Well, they had a breakfast meeting there with Tony Blair. I had an opportunity to come along and chat to Tony Blair. So, and they invited me up. Not a Tony Blair fan, but they invited me up. So I went up and I had the opportunity to speak with him. But I'd also, because he still had influence in the corridors of power somewhere, I said, and he was a Newcastle United fan, I'd already prepared a letter about the distribution of finances within football. And I said to him that there needed to be some government legislation to make sure that the money was distributed more fairly. So I gave him a letter. He said, do me a favour. He says, also email it to my PA. Give me her email address. And I emailed it to her. And guess what? Never heard anything else since. But I was saying at that stage, this was back in 2009, I was saying to him what the problems would be eventually. And now here we are in 2021, when the problems are all there and people are complaining that there's too much money going at the top and not enough being filtered down. And the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer.
Yeah, it's very difficult to see how any club in League One, League Two that don't have multi-millionaire backers, almost billionaire backers now, can do what sort of we did. I guess the last club to do it were probably Bournemouth, but again, they had a billionaire Russian backer. So whilst it's nice to see a small club doing it, because for many years over the last 30 years, we've probably been a bigger club than Bournemouth for a lot of it. But they get a billionaire owner and they're in the Premier League with an 11,000-seater stadium. It's unlikely to see that happening in League One and League Two anymore.
Unfortunately.
So going back to the time we've just dropped out the Premier League, and Joe Royle's been at the club for a very long time and he chooses that time to leave. How difficult was that? Because obviously for a long time, you'd worked with Joe and you said it was a bit of a love-hate relationship at times, but you clearly knew how each other worked.
Well, I think Joe might have missed my company more than I missed his, because when we travelled to away games, we'd always have a game of cards on the coach. And we usually play 7-card brag, like, and what have you. There'd be 4 of us. It'd be usually me, Joe, Stuart Pike normally, and possibly Paul Ince from Manchester Evening News. We'd all get there. But there'd only be one winner, no matter how the cards were dealt. Joe, I don't know how he did it, but he always managed to win. We only played for £1 a time. We didn't play for bags of money like you, but Joe would always come out on top. He was very, very lucky at cards, Joe. So when Joe left, he'd obviously missed taking money off me on the regular away trips, but they were good trips.
So Joe leaves and Graham Sharp comes in. How difficult was that for you on the basis of knowing, you've worked with Joe for that long and now having to deal with somebody different with different ideas?
It wasn't too bad, because it was Graham's first managerial position. I mean, he'd been obviously at Everton, a big club. He'd seen how Joe operated anyway, so he knew what his involvement would have to be from a commercial point of view. So that was no problem. He was quite good in that respect, Graham. Very, very commercially orientated, yeah.
And how did he come to get the job?
How did Graham get the job? I say Joe recommended to the board. There's always plenty of applications in when a manager leaves, but Graham was highly recommended to the board by Joe.
Fair enough.
And of course, it was a cheap option. He was already there.
Yeah, boy, yeah. Oh, there's a theme involved there, Alan. So before we wrap the first part up, because obviously we're going to do two parts because this is your pre-chief exec days. So a couple of questions for you. Don't want you to think too much about the answers. We tend to wrap up every podcast with these questions. So best Latics player in that era?
Well, it's got to be Andy Ritchie, hasn't it?
Okay.
Would you agree?
Yes, Andy Ritchie, Earl Barrett, Richard Jobson. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of the important goals that Andy got, and a lot of goals, of course.
You're thinking that you sold a T-shirt with Andy Ritchie's face on it. That's what you're thinking.
I know. I mean, Roger did all right for us on commercially as well.
When he broke the goal scoring record, yeah. All right.
I was also, delighted to be there when Roger broke the club's goal scoring record and getting Eric Gemmell up, who held it previously, to present the award to him. That was great. Yeah.
All right, that's the best player. Favourite player from that era?
Gunner.
Any particular reason, or just
Gunner? He was such a nice man. He was very, very polite. And when I moved house, he helped me to carry the carpet into the house.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Favourite game from that period?
I think it's got to be St. Valentine's Day Massacre. I mean, I would have never thought we'd, win the first leg 6-0 and basically be guaranteed, your place at Wembley. So 6-0, incredible. You watch the goals back again and it's so wonderful to watch. And you can just hear what the commentator says about, the football and whatever. It's great. So that's got to be knowing that you're there. You've one foot in the Wembley Stadium at that time.
Excellent. And that is a great place to wrap up part one of the podcast. Next week, we will be doing part two, which will cover your years as chief exec at the football club and a few interesting stories from there as well. So thank you very much for joining us for part one, Alan. Cheers.
Cheers, Brody.
A big thank you to Alan Hardy for joining us today for part one of his two-part series. Next week, we begin in 1997 when he takes over as chief exec. So looking forward to recording that one. Thank you to all of you for tuning in this week, for watching or listening. Massively appreciated. A big thank you once again to our sponsors, AC Tyres, NFL Weekends and Eden Creative. Also to Luke for doing all the editing and all the stuff that I really can't do. It's proper beyond me, all that. Thank you very much for tuning in and join us again next week on the Chaddy Enders. Have a fantastic week. Cheers.